All righty, we're speaking with Hank Ruff. He's going to be out at Country Fever Tucson on Saturday, March 7th. Looking forward to seeing your show, Hank, and thanks for spending a little bit of time with us here in Tucson.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me out west. It's one of our first times really getting much out west, so we're excited to be out there.
So, for people discovering you, who is Hank Ruff?
I'm born and raised in southern Indiana. I grew up on old school country music is kind of what I grew up listening to. Merle Haggard, Buck Owens, Tammy Wynette, stuff like that. Uh, and once I got into high school, I kind of started listening to much more 90s country and heard a lot of newer stuff. And so, you know, my music's really a product of all of those things coming together, full of steel guitar and fiddle while still having some of those more modern rock elements and stuff like that too, that kind of has driven, a lot of current country music. So, yeah, yeah.
So, like, how did you discover some of those older bands you were just talking about? Was it your
So
parents, relatives,
yeah,
or?
so my dad is a major classic country fan. He had just for fun, he had a band with some of his friends. They played some of his original music, and then a bunch of, old school country. Hank Williams Sr. is who I'm named after. So, that's what got me into that stuff. But he didn't really listen to any, current country, meaning, any 2000s country and on. So I didn't really hear any of that stuff till I became old enough to kind of listen to my own music and start to discover, oh, here's Brad Paisley. Oh man, I love Brad Paisley. Oh, here's John Part, and kind of really discover stuff, later on that I never heard growing up with him. So a lot of the songs actually that I have out, a lot of my songs are, written, my dad and I have written them together. So it's kind of even more melting those influences and stuff. So.
So, you and your dad got together, just started writing songs?
Yeah, yeah. In late high school, we finally, I kind of realized, hey, why don't I put out some music? Playing all the covers are fun, but it'd be nice to throw in some original music. And then, here we are a few years later, and now we have a bunch of original tunes out, and a lot of
For
those are.
instance, If the Boot Fits, you wrote that with your dad, right?
Yes, I did. I did write If the Boot Fits with my dad. And that one, man, I would have never thought it was going to do as well for us as it has. Um, I don't know how long ago, but when it passed 1 million streams, I was just like, wow, that's cool. I never thought my dad and I were sitting in the living room one day during COVID and just writing a simple little tune. And once it hit that, I was like, that's a lot more streams than I ever thought it might get. So,
So your Hellbender project turned some heads as well. What did that mean to you?
yeah, that one was cool. I've been lucky enough, I went to Indiana University. So I went to school in Southern Indiana in Bloomington. The last 2 months I've been following the football team all over. I went to all the bowl games, having fun cheering on my Hoosiers. But during school, I was lucky enough to build up a pretty strong and loyal fan base in Southern Indiana and at IU specifically. And you know we had so many people buying that thing on iTunes that it came out and it was like, holy cow, this thing's at number one right now. And so I made sure to get some photos of it while it was there because that iTunes chart, it's only each day it changes rather than each week. So for that day, I was like, man, I I better get a lot of photos of this. 'Cause it was cool to see how much support we had and how many people bought that thing to get it all the way to number one for a couple days.
Now, before we talk about your show here in Tucson, I was reading your bio a little bit. Looks like you've done some, at least some shows with Jelly Roll, Hardy, etc. Is that true?
Yeah, man, that one, that show, so that was the Harley Davidson Homecoming Festival, and yeah, we were on the main stage with those guys, Hardy and Jelly Roll, and man, I couldn't say enough good things. Both of them were great, but Jelly Roll, who I really got to hang out with a little bit, he could not have been. Everyone says how great of a guy and how nice he is, and I always believed it, but you don't really realize how genuinely good of a guy that he is until being around him in person. I mean, he made me feel so welcome, made me feel like we belonged. It was awesome. I'll never forget it. And if I'm ever in the position of stardom that Jelly Roll is, I would like to think that I'll learn a lot and take a lot from what I learned from him and how good he treated us.
So, you guys, you're pretty big regionally in the Indiana, the Midwest. Have you guys done a national tour yet? Have you?
We've played coast to coast. We've played nationally. The term tour gets thrown around pretty loosely. I could say yes, we've toured nationally, which, depending on how you define a tour, we have. But we've been out all the way to California and Nevada. We've played out in the West Coast. We haven't made it to Arizona yet, so this will be our first time there, but we have played up and down California and over in Reno, Nevada. And then we've played the East Coast. But a tour, again, it depends on how you define tour.
So
I
maybe a
think a
lot
lot
of
of
one-offs or a little West Coast
well, we
swing
did
kind
a
of thing like
run.
that.
Yeah, I mean, we've
Yeah.
done a West Coast, I would call them runs more so. We did a West Coast run and an East Coast run, but it wasn't 75 dates out all at once, no going home. A lot of people say, "Oh, we're on tour," and they're playing like four shows and they're all like each 2 weeks apart, and they say it's their tour. And it's like, is that a tour? I don't know. So I'd say we've done runs out all nationally. We've played all over the place. Played
So,
all.
what can people expect? Because obviously, it's going to be your first time in Arizona, even in Southern Arizona, it's going to be your first time out here. What can people expect from a Hank Ruff concert?
Oh man. Well, so I think what's been really nice and helped our shows grow and grow and build the following is they can expect a show full of, original honky tonk, like kind of hardcore rock and country music, while also, I love throwing in, I love it when artists that I've seen, throw in some of their big influences in the cover songs that they grew up playing so that I get a, insight into what they, grew up hearing. And I've always tried to do that myself. So, you're gonna get a bunch of original music, but you're also gonna get maybe some George Strait, maybe a classic Heartland rock song. John Mellencamp is from 20 minutes from where I grew up. So I always love, showing some of my Indiana roots and throwing in, something like that. So you get all these different aspects of, what I grew up listening to, songs I've written, all kinds of stuff. And it's high energy. I would say that I run around the stage about as much as any artist that I know of. I run all over the stage. So it's a high energy show for sure.
Now, obviously, you're the star of the band. It's the Hank Ruff, but I watched some videos. You got some other guys backing you up. Are they the same guys with you the whole time? And who are they?
Yeah, I've been real lucky to have the Hellbenders, I named them. And it was much more a thing, I guess, of the past that a lot of those big country singers, their bands had a name. Merle Haggard was his band was called The Strangers. George Strait was the ace in the whole band. Um, Buck Owens, who was huge, he it was Buck Owens and the Buckaroos. So I kind of thought, hey, it'd be cool to acknowledge that there's gonna be four or five guys up here, always with me, and I'll give them a name. So the Hellbenders is what we kind of came up with, and I've been lucky to have pretty much a consistent group of the Hellbenders backing me for the 3 years we've been really doing this now. So they're fantastic musicians. I can't say enough good things. A lot of them were in the Indiana University as one of the top music schools, jazz and classical music schools in the country. And a lot of my band, they were jazz majors at IU, but jazz majors can play anything. They're some of the best playing by ear, just, improvising musicians around. So, they took into country music and they've one of them really already loved a bunch of country music, but now they all love country music, and it's been cool to see how we've grown as a band as we've played together longer and longer. And, we just know each other well and our tendencies on when we're improvising stuff. It's awesome. So I've been lucky to have those guys with me.
And who are they?
We got so on the lead guitar from Sykeston, Missouri, we got Ben Jackson on guitar. On drums, he comes from Indianapolis. His name's Chase Allen. And then on the bass guitar, we're gonna have Ryan Schwartz, and he comes from Philadelphia, but he's at Indiana University. He's a major here. And then the last thing, the real oddball that you're not used to in a country band is we got a saxophone. So Braden Wisely on the saxophone. He was a jazz saxophone major here at IU. And you know, it kind of I just thought, why not get a saxophone. That'll just make it different. It'll stand out. And so, he was the original, the first original member of this crew is Braden, who I got, and he's been great. And it's cool to see how he's learned how to fit the saxophone into country music more and more. When we started out, it was kind of hard to find because, you can't just listen to saxophone parts from other country recordings unless you listen to a couple Merle Haggard recordings from the late 70s and 80s. But other than that, you got to figure it out yourself. So it's been cool to see how he's done that.
So, as your career advances and as you get more and more popular, is there an artist that you would just really love to work with?
Oh man. Um, yeah, I guess, I think for childhood Hank's sake, I would say that Dwight Yoakam or John Anderson have been. I think I'd probably have to go with Dwight. No, no offense to Dwight, but singing next to John Anderson, I think would be so intimidating because I think John Anderson is just. I mean, his voice. I've always just been obsessed with John Anderson's voice, but Dwight Yoakam, he's kind of the bridge for me of getting from the really old school Buck Owens, Bakersfield country that my dad listened to into learning about 90s country and Clint Black and John Anderson, stuff like that. Dwight, I kind of learned because he was friends with Buck Owens and they did songs together. And then I was like, wait, who's this Dwight Yoakam guy? So growing up, Dwight was just he was my guy. So I'd probably have to say Dwight Yoakam is who I'd be a dream collab
Well,
for
let's hope
sure.
that happens for you. Probably. Well, I've heard nothing but nice things about Dwight, so you never know. He may watch this and call you
Yeah,
up.
yeah. I hope. Well, we got years ago. I played guitar for a country singer in Indiana when I was in high school, and we got to open for Dwight. And
Oh,
I,
wow.
I was on cloud nine, and I was wearing a cool Western shirt, and I was waiting as he was gonna come out from his bus and go straight to the stage. And this was my Dwight story. He walks out, and he's got a whole entourage of police officers escorting him in. He's just walking in like he's the coolest guy in the world, which he is. So he stopped right before he walked on stage. And he just turned to me, and I'm in high school, and I'm all excited, wondering what he'll say. And he said, "Did you warm him up good for us?" And I said, "I think we did, Mr. Yoakum." And that was my interaction with my hero right there. So
That is awesome. That is absolutely incredible. Now you've mentioned Indiana University, right? So
yeah,
are you
yeah.
still going to school?
No, no, no. So I finished up 2 years ago at
Okay.
Indiana. So I'm all done. And then realized, hey, this is my time to pursue music fully. So I've been all music since then. But I grew up in Bloomington, which is where IU is already. So, my Indiana University roots run deep, and I always get back as much as I can because Nashville to Bloomington's only a 4 hour drive. We got a big interstate that connects it real easy. So, I go back and forth between Bloomington and Nashville constantly. It's not a bad drive at all. If you leave late enough at night, us musicians are used to being up late, and it works in my
Yeah.
favor because if you leave late enough at night where there's no traffic, you can be there in 3.5 hours or be back in Bloomington 3.5. It's easy with no traffic late at night. So it's not
And
bad.
and Nashville is definitely a fun town.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it can be a dangerous town. There's too much fun stuff going on all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Have you obviously you probably have played there a few times. Have you played the Grand Ole Opry?
I have not played the opera. That is a total bucket list thing that I hope I can check off the bucket list.
I'm I'm sure you will.
So I got friends that have played the Opry. I got many friends that have played the Opry, and I'm hoping one day it'll align right and we'll be out there. So
I'm sure you will, Hank. And one last question here for you. How can people follow you? Are you on the web, social media? How can people find Hank Ruff?
oh yeah, super easy to find. Luckily, there really don't seem to be a lot of other Hank Ruffs out there. So on the internet, it's just hankruff.com. If you just Google my name, I think pretty much all my stuff comes up. My website, my Instagram is just Hank Ruff. My Facebook is just Hank Ruff. I'm just Hank Ruff. You don't have to worry about a crazy number at the end or some hyphen or anything. It's pretty easy to find. Yeah, we got a website, we got social media, all the main social media anywhere. So Yeah.
All right. Well, Hank, thank you for spending some time with us. Again, we're looking forward to seeing you at Country Fever Tucson Saturday, March 7th with Austin Burke and the Unwound Band. It looks like it's going to be a fun day of country music and all kinds of fun stuff going on there.
Yeah, we can't wait to be there. Thanks for having me on.
No problem.